We're going to throw a bunch of these up as we go. This is an import-export graphic for corn specifically. It comes from the green countries, it goes to the red countries. Corn is a squiggly little product because it can only be grown in a few places that have the right humidity profile. Now here in the Midwest, we're like, woo, not everyone can grow corn. Mid-continent, humid summers, that's what you need. You don't have that in most of the world. In fact, in the Eastern Hemisphere, the only place you have it at all is Ukraine. Now, the Ukrainians have been shifting their export portfolio because there's a war on. They're focusing on the things they can get the most bang for the buck for. So there's a UN program to help ships get in and out of Ukrainian ports that at the moment the Russians have signed off for, but it's very limited. And so they've stopped exporting wheat for the most part. They've shifted everything to corn. Corn exports are actually up a little bit. But it's not a stable system. Right now, the Russians are targeting civilian infrastructure, specifically electricity infrastructure, in the interest of causing as much terror, disruption, and civilian deaths as possible. But it's winter. That's why that strategy has been chosen. Fast forward a few months to summer. You take out the power in Kiev, doesn't matter so much. That's when they'll go after the ports to try to hit the economic lifeline. So we should expect this year agricultural exports from the Ukrainian space to largely stop. There'll still be some stuff by rail, that's less than 10% of the total. There's a different rail gauge between Ukraine and the rest of Europe. So for those of you who care about corn, you're about to lose the number 4 producer in the world. Now, before you get too excited about that, keep in mind, I'm going to be talking here about a lot of other agricultural products. We're going to be seeing disruptions all over the place. To think that in this country, if we're dealing with global food shortages, we're going to continue with the fuel standard in its current form without a conversation, you got your head in the clouds. I'm not saying ethanol's going away. I'm saying in the next couple of years, we're going to have an open, honest, deep conversation in this country about whether we want to feed the world or fuel. I don't know how that's going to go, but that conversation will start by the end of this year. All right, let's talk about some non-ag stuff. You guys care about commodities in general, and some of these are hilarious. So if you take the first column, this is where all of the people involved in the world are collectively the world's largest supplier. They're the second largest for the second column, and so on. Just going to put a few of these out. Let's say you care about the environment and think that EVs and solar panels or nuclear power are the way to go. If you want to do the full transition, we need twice as much copper as we have now. We need 10 times as much lithium. We need 4 times as much chromium. Well, the Russians are a top 3 supplier for a number of things that we absolutely have to do the transition at scale. So not only do we need to massively expand global access, we need to keep the Russians in the game, and they're not. Which means the green transition in its current imagining is completely impossible. This is where things get dark. The world's #1 wheat exporter has created the 5 wheat exporter and is deliberately destroying all agricultural infrastructure. There's no way that doesn't have massive supply, famine, and cost implications. Oh, this is... Okay, so the former Soviet Union doesn't have bauxite. That's the stuff you use to make aluminum. They have to import it all. They use the spare electricity systems because when the Soviet system collapsed, their industry went away, but their power generation was okay. So they've got the cheapest power in the world after the United States. So they bring in the bauxite, they process it into metal themselves, and then they send it out. All the bauxite came from Ireland and Australia, which decided that they don't want to support a genocide, and so they stopped export. So the aluminum system is in the process of collapsing in Russia. Titanium, the ore comes from Ukraine, but it's processed in Russia. So that's gone to zero as well. You guys have heard about Brexit? So the Brits can't figure out what the hell's going on. They know they have to have a trade deal with the United States in order to move forward. And the US has made it very clear, this is great, we'll talk about the details, but just so we're clear, your participation in European aerospace has to go away. Well, Airbus, the European consortium, is Spanish and French and German and British aerospace companies. And we're telling them that they have to basically join Boeing. The primary consumer for former Soviet titanium and aluminum is Airbus. So European aerospace's future is one without the components the Brits provide, which are the... And Gorbachev's like, this is great, peace in our time, but there's just one little catch, Ronnie. You got this idea called Star Wars with a giant space laser shield that's going to shoot down missiles. Now, if we each have 30,000 nuclear weapons, that's irrelevant. But if we only have a few dozen, that might actually work. So for this project to get off the ground, for this to be fair, Star Wars has to go away. And Reagan said something very Reagan-like, along the lines of, well, Mikhail, I didn't realize that you thought life was fair. And that was the end of the summit. So Gorbachev goes home, convinced that giant space lasers are the future of great power competition, gives the order to build out the supply chains to make it happen, but then the Soviet system collapses. But not before the supply chain went into place. Not coming back because most of these facilities are maintained by foreigners with various investment in technological.
Global food shortages have become a major concern in recent years, with millions of people around the world struggling to access the food they need to survive. One of the key drivers of this crisis is the production of corn, which has been under pressure due to a number of factors including climate change, pests and diseases, and changing consumer preferences. Recent data shows that global corn production is down by around 5% compared to previous years, and this is having a major impact on the availability and cost of food. Corn is a crucial ingredient in a wide range of products including cereals, bread, and meat, and its shortage is affecting everything from the price of a loaf of bread to the availability of livestock feed. One of the main factors driving the decline in corn production is climate change. Rising temperatures and changing weather patterns are making it harder for farmers to grow crops, and many are struggling to adapt to these new conditions. Pests and diseases are also a major challenge, with a growing number of corn crops being impacted by invasive species and other threats. Another key issue is changing consumer preferences. As people become more health conscious and aware of the environmental impact of their food choices, there is a growing demand for plant-based alternatives to meat and other animal products. This is leading to a shift away from corn-based animal feed, which is exacerbating the shortage of this key ingredient. Despite these challenges, there are a number of initiatives underway to address the global food shortage crisis. Governments and nonprofit organizations are working to support farmers, develop new technologies, and promote sustainable agriculture practices that can help mitigate the impact of climate change and other threats. As consumers, we can also play a role by supporting local farmers and choosing plant-based alternatives to meat and other animal products whenever possible. By working together, we can help ensure that everyone has access to the food they need to survive and thrive, even in the face of these challenging times.